I know that you've been recently in our region, in Kazakhstan and in Georgia. And can you tell me a little bit about your visits and what have you done, and especially in Armenia?
Sure. So for the past few weeks, I've been based out of Kyrgyzstan, Kazakhstan, flew into Georgia, and then now here in Armenia. And a lot of what I've been doing is just meeting with local LGBT and feminist activists and artists to try to get a better sense of what the political situation is like in this part of the world. I think one of the things that happens is that we talk a lot about what's happening in Russia, but we pretend as if nowhere else exists around here. And I think what I'm finding is that actually there are both really incredible expressions of homophobia and transphobia, as well as really profound acts of resistance.
Okay, and you're coming from one of the most progressive cities in the world, and I know that you've been touring with your duo in Europe. Can you talk a little bit more about those differences, in Western world and especially in our region that you faced towards trans and LGBT queer people?
Sure. I think a lot of people are surprised when I say that New York City actually isn't the progressive oasis it pretends to be. I actually feel more unsafe in New York than most places in the world. Every day that I go outside, I'm harassed. People spit on me, people try to push me in front of trains, people throw trash at me, people say that they want to beat me. I get multiple rape and death threats. And it's important to understand that the progress in the US has just been for white people and has just been for cisgender people. Those of us who are trans people of color are actually experiencing escalated forms of violence, which have, if anything, been confirmed by the recent Trump election, where we've seen a spike in hate violence against trans women of color and gender nonconforming people of color. So actually when I'm traveling across the world, people are like, wow, these places must be much more homophobic or transphobic than you're used to. And I'm like, actually no, everywhere I have to do the same thing, which is think about, am I going to be going home alone? Do I have access to private transport? What time will I be coming home? And all those questions sort of influence what I'm going to wear and where I'm going to go.
What do you think different something or someone that is not considered to be normal in a particular society is being harassed, is being denied by other people? Why do you think it's like that, and how to struggle with that?
You know, a lot of what I talk about is I'm a person of Indian descent, and what's interesting is that historically in South Asia, we had multiple genders. We didn't actually just have this category of male or female, but it was only actually after we were colonized by the British that we were assimilated into the Western gendered system. And so I've understood from a very young age that often I experience discrimination because people recognize themselves in me. It's not that I'm unfamiliar. It's not that they don't know what I am. It's that they precisely know what I am and they've had to repress that in themselves. So I feel like for me, repression breeds resistance. And actually, I think some of the most homophobic and transphobic people are people who could be potentially LGBT themselves. Because if you actually didn't have a problem with us, that would show that you were confident in your own identity. But that's why I like to say a lot of these very masculine, machismo men actually might be gay or might be trans. And it's just that they're playing pretend. I think we know that very well in our own communities because for so many years I had to pretend to be straight. I had to pretend to be a man. I was homophobic, I was transphobic. But that's because I was denying parts of myself that I couldn't be honest about.
From your interviews, I know that you're identifying yourself not as man and neither as woman. Mm-hmm. And do you think that, if I'm not wrong, you think that gender binary is not necessary? Mm-hmm. So let's imagine someone wants to be identified like a gay man or lesbian woman. Mm-hmm. Why do you think they want to particularly identify themselves like something? Is it because of stereotypes, and how can we protect some groups' rights without somehow classifying them? How
Sure.
we can do that?
Yeah, totally. So you're correct. I identify as non-binary, which is a term used to describe people who identify as neither men nor women. Some of us could be both, some of us could be neither. For me, I just don't even really think about either. And when it comes to the question of how do we fight for both non-binary people and for people who want to be a certain gender, I always lead people to think about what happens when we have children. The first question we ask is it a boy or a girl? Even before the child is alive, there's already so many sets of assumptions and stereotypes that are ascribed to a little smiling child, and then we direct them into one of two trajectories without any interrogation if that's the best thing that we should be doing. All of us have a stake in ending that system. We should be able to allow young people to decide for themselves what feels right. When I was a little kid, actually, I gravitated much more to feminine things, but I was punished for that because it was seen as something that I shouldn't be doing. I'm not saying that everyone should raise their kids to be non-binary. What I'm saying is that listen to your kids about what they want and what they feel like. And if they say, hey, actually, I identify more with this category than the other, that's cool, but they should be able to make that decision for themselves. And right now, we allow families, we allow the government, we allow religion, we allow culture to make that decision. And I think people's gender should be a personal choice, not something decided by other people.
So you're criticizing like Western today's political system, but we can say that today's political system slowly, but step by step, is recognizing LGBT rights, like gay marriages, legalizing gay marriages. Do you think that these legal regulations is important? And if not this way, then how you see the progress in terms of like protecting and recognizing LGBT rights?
Sure. So I would say that in the United States, we have legal equality for LGBT people, but we also have 29 murders of trans people last year. Legal equality has in no way translated into any meaningful difference in the majority of our lives. This is because it's really easy to point at a policy and be like, oh, look, we're progressive, but policy doesn't shift people's hearts and minds, and that's why I'm an artist. I believe in funding cultural work because that's how you change people's minds. I know that when people see me perform, what I'm actually engaging with is not about logic or not about reason, it's about heart. I tell them, look, I go through the exact same things that you go through. Heartbreak, loss, loneliness. And it's only when we can humanize LGBT people through using art that I think we can actually have meaningful change.
Can you tell me a little bit more about your art and how you see implementing changes through art?
Sure. So from a young age, I've turned to art as a way to cope with all the violence and discrimination I experience in society. The thing about being LGBT is that often you have to not only be harassed, but be silent about it. Because the minute that you speak about it, you experience more harassment. That sort of forcibly outs you to your family and your communities. So for me, the only sort of community I had was my pen and paper, where I would just write for hours about what I was going through, try to figure it out. And from that sort of cathartic and emotional process, I realized, the irony about performance is that we pretend performance is when you're pretending to be something that you're not. But the truth is, performance is one of the only spaces in our culture we can actually be honest anymore. We go to the movies, we go to concerts, we go to our favorite bands, we go to see artists because we want to cry, because we want to feel. And so for me, a lot of what my performance is about is just actually, I want to create spaces for people to be honest, not just about LGBT issues, but about heartbreak, about loss, about angst. A lot of the people who come to my show are young people, because I think young people across the world actually are really kind of fed up with the lies that we've been told about what life was going to be like, fed up with all the debt that we have, fed up with all the sort of political issues that we're facing. And art becomes a space we can actually begin to imagine that there could be something else. And so for me, I think the purpose of art, especially today, is to show people that another world is possible and it's being made by artists.
In one of your interviews, you said that patriarchy often is being protected not only by men, but often is being protected by women, especially white women. Can you make that case more clear?
Sure, I'd love to.
And why do you think women do that if they're like victims of that?
Totally. The thing is, men are so lazy, they make women do the work of patriarchy for them. And what I mean by that is that oftentimes women can be harassing each other more than anyone else, saying you're not thin enough, you need to shave more, you need to get married, all of this constant aggression and animosity towards one another. And that hurts even more because it's happening from someone who you think should be getting it. But I think what's important to recognize is that patriarchy has no gender. We can all be patriarchal to each other. And what's really important for us, especially those of us who are feminists, is to actually say, I'm going to stop that cycle of violence, and I'm actually going to treat people with respect and dignity. And respect and dignity also have no gender. And I think what I'm just sort of asking people is, I don't need you to be a feminist, I don't need you to be an activist, I just need you to be a kind human being. And right now, what we do to women and LGBT people is not kind. And actually, all of us are doing this to people. And I think we as trans people know this very well, that from a young age, I was punished both by men and women. Except when I experienced violence from women, I always was even more heartbroken, because I was seeing, don't you see that you're doing the exact same things that men do to you, to me? And then I began to realize that often the only way to heal is to hurt other people. And I want to break that system and actually say the way that we heal is by helping other people.
Yeah.
So I wrote a series of poems after being harassed on the street, just because I wanted people to realize that the people that they were harassing were real people with real lives and real desires. And this is one of those poems. To the two men who yells, "That's a man in a dress. Hey everyone, that's a man in a dress," while pointing at me on 6th Avenue. I wanted to turn around and point back, shout, "Hey everyone, that's an insecure man. That's an insecure man." But then I realized how redundant it sounded, like describing a color as a bluish blue or a fight as a violent conflict. What is a man but a private repression made public, made profit, made policy? What is a man but a question mark so lonely it wrapped around itself so many times it began to resemble a body? I have spent the past 25 years trying to figure out where man begins and where man ends. And what I've discovered is that man begins only where I end. Let me be more explicit. Man begins when I end, or rather, man begins because I am ended, which goes to say, in order for man to exist, I cannot, which goes to say, one day I got so confident in myself I was no longer a man, which goes to say, I have people come out to me as men every day by leaving me behind. It is hard to have your abundance mistaken as absence.